everyone, it's Professor Hall, and today we are talking about revisions. So, probably not as long of a lecture as we normally have. I know last week was a mini lecture, about 5 minutes, and I'm sure to go over that, but I'm hoping to kind of keep this a little bit brief because we've really been talking about revisions the whole term, looking at those before and after instructive texts, talking about the first draft and then why it kind of didn't work, and then looking at the second draft and talking about why those changes made it better. So when it comes to revisions, there are a couple different types, and I think it's just important to know those types and to talk about the differences when it comes to creative writing, because the revisions in creative writing are quite a bit different than revisions for academic writing, which is probably what most of you are more used to. So the first is that the first type are large scale revisions. Large scale revisions, there's a few different types of big major changes. That's what large scale means. There should be a hyphen there describing the types of revisions. So, major changes. The first is developmental editing. This is sort of what I specialize in as an editor. You look for large issues, because it is a major, large-scale thing, such as plot holes, inconsistencies in characterization, characters that need to be added, deleted, or changed. I'll put those in between just so it's a little bit easier to see. Things like problems with conflict. That has to do with, right, we talked about like tension, authenticity, motivations, etc. Possibly looking at other things, changes in setting, consistency in point of view, very important. So things of that nature, that has to do with what developmental editing is. So basically the idea with developmental editing is you are developing the story in a piece of fiction, whether that is whether that's a short story or a longer work like a book. Okay, I paused for a minute so you can kind of see things a little bit more clearly than they were when they were all in one block. So large scale or developmental edits, a couple of the other things that go along with this that I didn't mention but should, issues with a timeline. So maybe they mentioned in one scene that something happened 10 years ago, in another scene they talk about it happening 20 years ago. Maybe we have a flashback where the period details don't match up with 10 or 20 years ago. So issues with a timeline, problems with pacing, too fast. When we looked at conflict, the action moved too quickly. We needed to increase the tension and draw out the scene a little bit. Usually it's the opposite. Things are moving along too slowly, I find. But issues with pacing. And in terms of plot, I talked about plot holes, but also subplots. Sometimes needing to be added, sometimes needed to be deleted, whatever the case may be. There might be problems with the story structure, so the climax might not be really occurring where the author wants it to. And you can, if you're writing a book, find a developmental editor and work with them. Essentially, they're helping to get your story in shape so that it can be published. But I also think that you can maybe not very easily, maybe it takes a little bit of effort, but I think that you can, as a writer, you should be looking for these things on your own as well. And you should be able to kind of say, oh, there's a plot hole there. Oh, my setting isn't quite right. Maybe I need to put that scene in a different location. Oh, my point of view, I kind of wanted it to be limited and it's a little more omniscient than it should be, or I want it to be omniscient and I'm not hearing about, I'm hearing more about what character A thinks than characters B, C, and D, and I need to add a little bit more of their thoughts and feelings and maybe their actions that we don't see, just to have a more consistent point of view. But if you were to later on work with an editor, they would go over these things with you and give you typically a write-up for your manuscript if you're looking at a whole book or if you have a collection of short stories. And they would talk about, they'd go through each one of these things. So this part's very developed, this character needs a little bit more work, this person's dialogue is not consistent with their character, you have a problem with pacing through chapters 6 through 7, you kind of lose my interest, you need more tension, you need a little bit more conflict, right? So all of those types of things, that the big major things we've been talking about through this semester, that's what would be with the large scale changes. Now, large scale, developmental, working on big pieces of the book. The other type is small scale, and with small scale there are a few, if I could get away from the weird arrow. Okay, so small scale changes, there are a few different there are a few different types of these. The first is called copy editing. So copy editing occurs after those big developmental things, and it doesn't always happen in a book. Not every book has a copy editor. Sometimes you might be able to do some of this on your own. Depending on the type of book you have, you might just have proofreading, which is a different type that we'll talk about in a moment. But basically, copy editing involves a few different types of things. So they look at grammar, usage, syntax, word order. So the proofreading types of things, punctuation. They also sometimes do fact editing, or fact checking rather. Fact editing. We just edit those facts and change them. No. So yeah, they look at those things. So for example, a small fact edit. I had someone with a book where they had a scene in a chain restaurant, and I don't remember which one, but the character was ordering a Dr. Pepper and was served a Dr. Pepper. A very small detail, but the person came back to me. I don't drink pop, so I did not fact check for this, or soda, depending on where you're from. But she came back to me and said, "Megan, they don't serve Dr. Pepper at that restaurant. I was just there the other day." And I was like, well, it's not that most readers would notice or care, but it is a small fact that you do want to be authentic, right? Sometimes authors will have, if their book is set in a particular town or city, they'll have a statement at the beginning of the book, usually with the copyright information, that says, the road names and the geography of this town have been used fictitiously, so that you don't have to have exactly the character going down High Street and turning left onto Central Avenue and then turning right onto Park Lane Circle, and you don't have to have all of that in there, which sometimes some local authors tend to do that to get the local flavor, but they don't need to. Yeah, so fact checking. I have an editor that I worked with for Sutherland. The developmental edits I did on my own, as you guys saw, over and over and over again, but I had a lot of fact checking that I needed a little bit of help with. There were details like, what do the wheels look like on a circus train in 1890? I looked that up. I tried to find them. I had her kind of look for some pictures. What were the popular types of dresses? Did they have, in some of those years, you have a flounce in the back. In other years, hoop skirts were in other years, a bustle, that's the word I'm looking for, was in. So it's kind of like if I had somebody wearing bell bottoms in 1980, it wouldn't be, unless there's something about that character, people were not really wearing bell bottoms in 1980s, right? Similarly, in 1880s, there were some years when people wore bustles and other years where they would not have been caught dead in that because that was outdated fashion. And so for that reason, the fact checking was really important. Which businesses were in town at the time, who was running them, what the dates were that these women were performing. I think I talked about this book before, but if I haven't yet, it's about a group of circus performers in the 1800s. And yeah, so the fact checking was important because there were so many historical details, right? I really needed help with that copy editing. So proofreading is different in that it really is just looking at those smaller issues. And so, for example, it's not proofreading, something like that. So spelling, grammar, punctuation, etc. Small things. They are not changing where the paragraph breaks are. They are not, sometimes they might be looking at the formatting, but for the most part, they're not going to make major changes. They're not going to look at something like usage. They're not going to change a word. So if I say back frills instead of bustle, a proofreader is going to leave it as back frills. A copy editor might change it to say bustle because they know that that's the word that I'm trying to use, right? A copy editor might change some more things than a proofreader would. A proofreader is really kind of your last line of defense, looking for things like commas and apostrophes and some usage of things like there, and your. So copy editing and proofreading, and then we also have line editing. This is something that I do for my own books as well. It has to do with the use of, these people are looking at the use of language and the flow of the text. So sometimes this means taking words out, adding words, using the thesaurus to find a synonym, but sometimes fixing awkward sentences. What they're not doing at this stage is changing those major large scale. They're not making large scale changes. So I'm going to show you an example I have not looked at other than to know that this is a piece of fiction. It's a book that I started. I'm going to finish someday. It's a trilogy of fantasy books that have not looked at in a while, so I'm sure that there needs to be some line editing done, and I'm just going to grab the first couple paragraphs and we'll go through and I'll kind of show you what line editing looks like. Okay, once I had it in the right font, there's a little bit more here than I wanted necessarily, but I think it'll work. Okay, so this is from the first chapter, so I don't think I need any setup. We'll look at it as we go. Katie was bent over reforming her straw-tick mattress when a tendril of smoke snaked its way around her long red braid. Well, first, proofreading. There needs to be a comma there. I don't like that word because it sounds like she's reforming rather than, I'm guessing I meant reforming, like she's putting straw-tick in the mattress. So if I just have fixing, whoops, I'll put it in bold, but not caps. Katie was bent over fixing her straw tick mattress when a tendril of smoke snaked its way around her, and I keep tripping over that, snaked its way. Do I want it to be, do I need that detail quite yet, that she has red hair? Probably not. Snaked its way through the open. They don't really have windows, but I'll say window for now. Okay, I think that works better. I don't think we need to info dump yet the detail that she has red hair. She turned swiftly, worried she'd burn her breakfast. She'd burned her breakfast. She had burned her breakfast. I hate that. She turned swiftly, worried about her breakfast in the fire. We don't need cooking fire. In the fire outside her hut. She had taken the time to put a pot of porridge. I'm going to say it sounds like this might be a luxury. It was I'm going to say, I don't want luxury, a rare indulgence. A pot of porridge along with a small pan, we don't need that part, along with a rare egg from one of her mom's last chickens. Okay, I think this sounds quite a bit better. I'm going to paste, hold on one second. Okay, so I just pasted here the first version and then the second version. Katie was bent over reforming her straw tick mattress when a tendril of smoke snaked its way around her long red braid. She turned swiftly, worried she'd burned her breakfast in the cooking fire outside her hut. She had taken the time to put on a pot of porridge along with a small pan containing a rare egg from one of her ma's last chickens. The second version, Katie was bent over fixing her straw tick mattress when a tendril of smoke snaked its way through the open window. She turned swiftly, worried about her breakfast in the fire outside the hut. It was a rare indulgence, a pot of porridge along with a rare egg from one of her ma's last chickens. Now, you notice that even as I'm reading, I'm not tripping up this part in particular. I don't know what it is about the around and long, but for whatever reason, I keep tripping up over that. We have from 64 words to 54, so we've cut 5 words out, but we're not changing the essential nature of the scene. So in that sense, it's line editing. It's not developmental editing. And basically, this is what I would do for an entire book once I have it written through. So I'll shrink this back up. So yeah, I basically, my writing process, for people, sometimes they wonder, but my writing process is to write the book, get the whole thing out, and then if it has developmental problems, usually I try to take care of those along the way, but then I read through and I line edit the whole thing, and I look, while I'm line editing, I look for any developmental issues that I haven't already taken care of. But you can see it's a little bit of a longer process. You know, when you're just proofreading, you're just looking for, as I said in the first draft that you saw, I was missing 2 commas. I fixed one, I didn't get the other yet, but looking for issues with commas, making sure that I have, you know, here ma is lowercase. Do I want, instead of, do I want that, right? Do I have, yeah, I don't here, but I'll add one by mistake. Do I have the wrong its and I need to fix it to its belongs to its pit, not it is, right? Those kind of things. But the line editing is really looking for word choice, for flow, for imagery, which we're going to talk about later, all of that kind of thing. So when you're looking at your own book, some of the things with line editing, if you're going to do this on your own, and you will for unless I've given you some specific suggestions. Some of the things that you can look for are flow. Reading it out loud for me helps because you can kind of see where your tongue gets twisted, where it doesn't quite sound right, where you have an image that kind of doesn't work, or a word choice that's not the right thing, or you've used that word some 8 times and you don't want to use it again. Those types of things. It really has more to do also with consistency of your personal style as an author. So to recap, some of the changes that you can make this week, if you want to do some large scale, or also known as developmental editing, if you want to work on those larger developmental edits, consistency with characterization, problems with conflict, which I now see I have twice, problems with pacing, setting, point of view, all of those things that we've been really focusing on this semester, and kind of develop that story into a cohesive piece of fiction. Or if you want to go through and make small changes, copy edit, and do some fact checking on yourself, look some things up, proofread, go through and change the style, the line editing, the flow. I didn't put dialogue up here because a lot of times dialogue comes down here. I'll put this including dialogue. Unless it's consistent problem with dialogue. Typically with line editing, it's here and there that the character's making a word choice that doesn't work. You can do both if you have the time. You want to do the large scale first and then work on those smaller changes. But yeah, that's it. I can't wait to see your revisions, and I'm excited to see how you change things and what things you decide to change. Thanks, everyone.